The lovely Liz, neglected wife of an unscrupulous MP, continues to search for her missing lover. The police continue to search for the murderer of Dr. Wade. The men who claim to be from the water board continue to tunnel underground. And we, for our part, continue to build our model against the backdrop of death, destruction and intrigue. Welcome to Farmerton. One of the most glittering jewels in Farmerton's crown is, of course, its magnificent tramway. Now, we've got some of the track work down, but let's have a talk about the actual trams themselves. Brian, tell me about this lovely tram.
Well, this is about as simple as you can get with trams, really. It's a die-cast model. It's got 4 wheels in the middle, very close together, to allow the whole thing to swing when it goes onto the sort of corners they have on trams.
Because they're quite tight, aren't they? So you've got to get around the tight corners.
And this tram is a Maidstone tram.
There's something missing here, mate. I'm not an expert, but what's going on there?
It might possibly, but it hasn't got any wheels.
That's it. I knew there was something.
Yeah. Well, anyway, it's quite easy to remedy that. You can get these little motor bogies, and that does everything you need to make it work.
So that is actually the motor. That's all it's going to run on.
Well, the motor's inside and all the gear.
Everything's in there.
It's all in there.
That's amazing. So all we've got to do is pop her in there.
Yeah.
And that is the running gear.
Yeah.
More is complete. Nothing else.
No, you can just spark that up.
That's amazing. The thing about trams is they used a thing called a trolley pole on the top of the tram there to pick up the power to drive the wheels from an overhead cable. Now, the next thing we've got to model for our layout, of course, is that cable and the street furniture which holds it up. Now, Brian, you had an infallible plan.
Well, we were going to buy them.
Right.
Unfortunately, we couldn't.
Right, okay. Which moves us swiftly to plan B, which was?
Well, under those circumstances, you're going to make them yourself.
That's a nice thing.
We knocked this up early.
Right, I'm going to have a crack at making one of these, aren't I, Brian?
Yeah, and if you can make it, Simon, anybody can make it.
Thank you for that vote of confidence.
Anytime.
Now we're going to do a bit of soldering here. Now, don't be frightened by soldering, because it's a good thing. How many of these do we need to make?
About 30.
About 30 of them.
Yeah.
So if you're doing something like this, which is a very repetitive thing, and they've all got to be the same, make a jig first, save yourself a lot of grief. And all a jig is basically a way of holding all the parts and showing you where the pre-cut lengths of the different components are. What's it made out of, Brian?
Well, this is a bit of brass tubing, and you can get these bits from any sort of good model shop. And these are bits of brass wire.
Now, this isn't all homemade, it isn't all scratch built. One of these components of this thing is actually purchased, and that is this little jobby here. What is he called?
Well, that's called an ear, Simon. It's basically to support the wire.
First thing we're going to do is to flatten off the side where we're going to make the holes. It's just going to file a little flat section onto here. The reason you're going to file it in there, just a little groove, is so that when you get your pin drill, you're just going to pop it in there, and it makes it very easy to get it started. Now, I'm not going to do that because that'll take forever as well. So I've actually drilled the holes in here. Now, because you've got 2 rails, the top rail, which finishes there, that doesn't go all the way through, but our lower rail, the main supporting rail, goes all the way through. So obviously you've got to drill right the way through it. So here's Mr. Pin Drill, and he's drilly, and that's gone all the way through. And the second one, you're just going to drill through the first half of the tube. That done, it's time to start assembling and soldering. So what we need now is the brass rod. There you go. Now what we're going to do is to pop it into our main supporting pole. There we go. Lines up on our jig perfectly. Now then, solder. Sounds like the devil's work, doesn't it? But it's not. It's a very good thing. This is solder here. Now, this particular solder has a flux in it, and flux is basically a cleaning agent. As it melts, it cleans all the copper. But you think, and you recommend using some extra flux as well. Now, this is a liquid flux. Why do you do it? Why do you use the extra flux?
It just makes it flow better. This particular flux is very good for brass and materials like that.
Although our actual joint wants to be there, if I can show you there, just line it up there. That's where it's going to live, like this one. We're actually going to add the solder a little bit east of that, aren't we? Because if we tin it, then you say we're going to slide it in and then heat it up and off it'll go.
And you need very little solder.
So, Brian,
put
tips.
some more flux on.
Put more flux on.
Otherwise it will evaporate. So
More
just
flux.
before you touch it, you just put a bit of flux on. Doesn't matter how much you use, it'll just evaporate.
Okay, going in. Oh.
Hold it there, nice and long, so it flows round. That's it. And the main thing to remember when you solder, people tend to dab at it.
Yeah, that's what I used to do.
You've got to get the heat in. It's got to be really nice and hot.
So when I used to do it, I'd be sitting there going, more, and you don't need that at all. Okay, so once we've tinned it, it's a question of pushing it into place. So we just move her up.
I mean, when you're actually tinning things, quite often you need to put a little bit on each surface, and then just put enough heat in to put them together. But with this, you can just slide it in, and with flux on it, there's enough just to form a little joint round the...
Okay. So the secret of this game, it's Flux City, isn't it, really? The more, the merrier. Okay, one at the back, I'm going in. So it's just a question of keeping this on here.
It's always a question of getting it hot enough.
Yeah.
Bad solder joints are generally because the solder isn't hot enough to melt properly and flow.
What we're going to do now is the really tricksy bit. What we're going to do is to take our little ear, that's our moulding, that's the only thing you can buy, and slip into it a very fine piece of brass rod. Fiddly doesn't cover it. There you go. She's in there. And what I've done is I've bent an L shape on the end there. Now what I've got to do is bend another L shape on there. So with a pair of pliers, I'm going to bend it up. Just there you go, like that. That's the chappie. About there. That's her. Now she's ready to go into the end of our supporting arm, which is just here. Now this is Mr. Fiddley's house. All right, be brave, son, go. Hey, I'm in. You need fingers like a little soldering monkey, don't you? Ow! Fingers on fire. Right, put her in there. This one is Brian's, as you can see, and it's very lovely and very precise. And this one is mine. Can anyone spot the difference?
We're not the only people interested in trams. Just have a look at what Len Squance has been up to with his model of Blackpool.
The layout's at a very early stage of construction, and there's an awful lot of work to do. It's fairly time consuming, but that's what we've got hobbies for, isn't it? Unfortunately, there aren't any commercially available motorised Blackpool trams, so all of them have had to be made using various methods. This first one is a centenary class, and this is a specially commissioned kit. It's a one-piece resin body with white metal inserts of the dash panel so that we can reproduce any of the centenary car variations. A cast white metal chassis. Motorisation is by a commercial motor bogie. Moving on, this is the next best effort. The top deck has been created using printed circuit board and copper strip with copper wire soldered on to form the handrails. Finally, we've got the commercially available die cast, and using nail polish remover we're able to take off the livery and then add our own using decals which we've produced in the computer. Every lamppost in the Blackpool illuminations area has the feature mounted on it, which is illuminated as well as the street lights. Any layout, obviously, of the Blackpool illuminations needed this feature to be incorporated. Fortunately, I had some tram kits made of cold cast resin, and that is clear. So that provided the means of making the illumination features, and we secured them using etched brass, which was again made specially for us. These collars are bent to shape and fit around the lamppost. The lights in this one are 3 ordinary grain of wheat bulbs, which are in series with the main bulb in the light. The shapes are various, and once it is fitted and the lights installed, decals which I've made and printed from photographs on the computer are fitted on. They're just ordinary water slide decals, but they're transparent enough to let the light shine through. And a circuit board using microprocessors control the pre-programmed sequence to give the alternate dimming and brightening of the alternate bulbs. The fibre optic strand comes through the back scene and comes into a piece of beer barrel tubing, which is hidden actually by the black plastic. The other end of the black plastic is enclosed with a cable tie, which is clamping the bulb holder. The sequencing for the illuminations is achieved by taking a particular bulb from a particular Christmas tree lighting set and matching that up with the fibre optic strands to give, as far as possible, a correct sequence. And in some cases, some buildings have 3 and 4 Christmas tree lights connected to it in order to reproduce the sequences as far as possible. And by the time we finish, there'll be approximately 8 kilometres of fibre optic strand in use, and several thousand Christmas tree bulbs as well.
Here are our posts that hold up our power cables for our trams. These are the ones I was working on earlier with Brian, and as you can see, we've got them all in, and we've even installed our tram power cable. There she is, up there. Isn't that fantastic? This is the most tricksy part of the tram setup here, this curve. What I couldn't work out is how we were going to get our power cable to follow the curve of the track. What we did is we had a look at the real world, and now they do it on proper trams. And what they do is they run another cable around the outside of the poles, around here, and then you have these tensioner cables that run in between tie bars across here and across there, and what they do is they pull the power rail across so you get the exact curvature that follows the track. Now all this had to be soldered together by hand by Alan. It's a very, very fiddly job. You even have to solder the power cable to these little things here. These are the ears, and then you have to file everything flat so it's nice and smooth so the tram can run underneath it and not foul any of this soldering. So it's very, very fiddly, but I think once it's done it looks absolutely brilliant.
Leonie Hutchinson is not only a conductress on one of Farmerton's wonderful trams, but she is also the girlfriend of Fast Eddie. And right now, Liz is quizzing her on where Eddie got hold of Ben's scarf. Leonie tells her that she gave it to Eddie as a gift after finding it further up the coast. Andy McMillan is a professional model maker. He's recently built a layout for his friend John, who wanted to make use of every square inch of his spare bedroom.
So Andy, what was John's brief to you when he set you this project? I mean, he hasn't given you a lot of space to work in, is it? How big's this room?
Well, it's 8 foot by 10 foot, and what John wanted was a bit of the old LMS in about the mid-50s, and preferably can I have mainline trains please, he said. So we thought, can we fit a 10 coach express into a small room? And this is how we did it.
You've based it in a specific area, haven't you?
Yes, the scenery is very much Settle and Carlisle, as are all the features, and there's nothing on here that you wouldn't find in a book on the Settle and Carlisle, with 1 or 2 minor exceptions.
So how does it all work? How do you manage to fit a 10-car train into this layout?
Down here underneath we have some hidden sidings. It trundles around underneath all the scenery, rising behind the hills there, comes out the tunnel mouth here. Does a complete lap of the room, and then it comes around again in front of the operator and disappears into a hole down there.
That's extraordinary. So how many feet of track do you think you've managed to cram into this space?
I don't know, but a low goods train will take about 14 minutes to go right the way around.
And all these little places actually do exist on the Settle and Carlisle Railway. What you've done is compress them into a 10 by 8 room. You had a nice analogy about painters and Turner.
Well, Turner was a wonderful chap, and I think he was our best painter, but he was quite happy to take a route up a Swiss pass, Alpine pass, and take the features that you would encompass on that route and squash them together into one painting, so that you've got the experience of the route in one visual scene. And that's what I've tried to do here. Take a length of line that was 70 miles long and get a flavour of it in 10 foot by 8 foot room. Which is a bit silly, but
so it's good enough for Turner, it's good enough
that's
for you.
right, precisely so.
One of the other things that I noticed is, of course, your track work. You've sort of added a rust effect, haven't you?
Well, a lot of people do that, but it's one of the things that removes that shiny toy element from it.
So what have you actually done here to make this look a little bit more realistic?
Well, I just painted on.
It's
a slow, tedious process, but it's got to be done. Somebody's got to
pay
do
off because it looks that much better. Well, this is one of my favourite areas. This bit down by the pub, the Summit Hotel. Well, to the Summit Hotel, is that real?
No, but the architecture is based on all the little cottages in Dent and those sort of West Yorkshire, North Yorkshire cottages. So you take that vernacular architecture, and in fact, if you look carefully, you will see that has enormous resemblance to the old Airfix church, Norman church.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I used to save time. Take the originals and then just put some windows in it, rearrange the bits.
Right, Andy, your dry stone walls, top marks set. I've seen lots of them in my travels, but this one, I have to say, is the best one I've seen. How did you do it? Go on.
That's very kind of you. Well, one day, a friend and I sat in the garden chopping up little bits of slate, and we assembled them into two 8-inch lengths of wall. Then we took mouldings of them, and using them two together, sometimes upside down, sometimes the right way up. All the dry stone walls you can see all the way around the layout are all made from those two original pieces.
But how did you get, when it goes up the hill and round the corner, how did you do that?
Well, it's quite easy to just saw it down the middle, file it to a butt joint and glue it together, which I would use car body filler for that.
All right.
Because you can then fill in the gaps with it at the same time.
Okay.
The curves are quite easy to achieve because it's moulded resin. You can just warm it up slightly and just bend it gently. It'll go so far, so curving sideways is no problem. But you also put the odd little piece of real slate in there, which would be impossible to mould, and it makes people think, oh, everything's been hand done, and of course it hasn't.
Right, so now, what about this gentleman? This is a little cottage, is it?
Ah, no, that's the speciality of Yorkshire, the bank barn, that is. You'll find hundreds of those up in North Yorkshire, and they're on a split level. They use the slope of the land, the sheep and the cattle go in the bottom, and the farmer takes his feed in the winter in the side door, which is on the floor above, and just shovels it down through the holes at the side into the feed bays beneath.
That's fine. So, well, how do you make the roof? Because the roof is spectacular.
Well, sometimes you've just got to go back to the old-fashioned methods of an individual tile.
Now, this is where the earth and stuff has been worn away by the weather, and it's revealing. It's the limestone underneath. Is it?
It's called a limestone pavement. And in fact, the bits that are raised up, I believe, are called clints, and the gaps between them are called grikes.
Andy had kindly agreed to show me one of the techniques he uses to make his wonderful rock faces.
So this would be the shape that
That's
you want
the
to make.
shape you want the end of the cliff.
And this chappie is just to support it.
Exactly.
All right, let's go from there.
Now, you've brought me some coal, I understand.
Yes, I had, and that's from the Bluebell Railway.
Because it's coal, lots of little bits crumble off.
Okay.
And you can't see what you're looking at. Now, it's going to make a mess. Don't do it with your mum's best carpet. She wouldn't approve. But in a workshop, we can always sweep it up afterwards.
Or
so
you can't, not sort of thing you can do in a wedding dress.
Probably not. I've never tried.
I'll tell you what, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, the first time I saw that bit, I thought, 00 Quarry. Now I'm looking at it, I'm thinking N-gauge mountainside, and now I'm looking at it, I'm thinking Z-gauge Montana. O-gauge, you know what I mean? It works on every gauge, doesn't it? You can use it for any scale.
That's right. Which would you like? You would like that a bit thinner, or do you want to get rid of
Well,
that
I like
piece?
that bit there.
You like that bit
I like
there?
that bit there because I like the sort of climb.
Okay,
so I
so
think
you just make that a bit thinner.
Yeah.
Okay, so you get a chisel and a mallet, and what you've got to do is a bit like tapping on a...
cutting on the old...
Yeah, like the old paving. It's got a fissure in it, it's natural, you don't know which way it's going.
There you go.
So you don't know what's going to happen to it until it's gone. But
okay, so how do we put it in place?
first thing we've got to do is whop a little bit of emulsion on there. We're just trying to create a surface so that the active ingredients in the filler
Don't soak into the...
don't soak into the woodwork.
Okay, so you're just sealing it, really?
That's all we're doing. You could use all sorts of other things, but emulsion's as good as anything.
So, Andy, this is the magic ingredient. What is it?
Car body filler. Pot of that, bit of coal, instant cliff. Put a good wedge on there. It's a bit like cement we've got a little wedge on there.
Yeah,
Don't want too much sticking out, and that's going to go onto there.
Lovely.
And about there, I reckon.
Yeah, oh yeah, that's it, because it fits right on the edge.
That's right, yeah.
So more filler.
We're going about there, so we'll put the dollop on there. Try and stick the two together. You know, don't be mean with it. Wallop lots in there. Bish bash bosh.
What do you mean don't be mean? Have you heard the stories? Alright, okay.
All right.
That's alright, here we go, we're in. So I'm going to pop her in there.
Yeah. I'll hold that piece.
Okay, hang on. Oh, there we go. Now, there we are. That's fissury.
Are you happy with that?
I'm happy with that. I'm walking away. Let's paint her up.
I've got down here, there's some white.
Right, what is this? Is this what
This is acrylic. We've got black because rocks tend to be grey colour, but they're not a plain dull grey. They want a bit of warmth in it. So we're going to a little bit of brown. This is raw umber, and that's all you need. We're going to get lots of variety in that.
Right.
The reason we're going to do this, paint the black rocks, black coal black, is to get it into the cracks and the fissures and fill up a few gaps here and there. If you've got any odd bits of filler that are sticking out where you don't really want them.
Andy, this is great.
Bit of brown. Okay. Same brush. We're not mussy about washing brushes and all that. I haven't got time for that. We're going to go downwards to try and get a little bit of texture into this edge here.
Yeah.
Right.
Mr. White's coming in.
Mr. White's coming in. There we go. Big dollop of that. And we take a little bit of this at a time, sort of amount. Just now. That's brilliant. That is. Now watch this. You can just see it's beginning to take.
Yeah.
A little bit of tear. Right, a bit more. I'm just going to tickle some of these surfaces here.
What is happening is it's catching in some of the
that's right, it's
in the grooves and the natural fissures.
That are already there. You're just dragging little highlights onto rocks, same as I've done there. Yeah, and don't get along the top edge because you know
that's where Mr. Guano would be.
That's right. Yeah.
Hey, look at that.
While the paint on my cliff is drying, why don't we take the chance to look at some rolling stock in action, courtesy of John, the man who commissioned Andy's model in the first place.
Do you recognise these cliffs? These are the ones I made with Andy, and I am so pleased with them. I think they're brilliant. And what's more, they are an integral part of our story because, having searched in vain for further clues to her lover's whereabouts, the lovely Liz takes a walk along the cliff top. Her thoughts. Suddenly, she feels a violent shove from behind, and as she tumbles from the cliff top, the figure of Venisatora can be seen striding away.